Hey, Fun Half crew, want to ask a question as it's something I'm grappling with around current mass shootings. I totally understand the desire to clamp down on guns and agree with it, but I'm a bit worried that any sort of gun control will disproportionately affect poor and non-white Americans. On top of it, in Portland this past year, properly trained anti-fascist good guys with guns were able to stop right-wingers in two separate attacks from committing mass murder, though one protester was killed in the second attack. I'm trying to reconcile the need to defend ourselves against extremists and the state who will murder our neighbors while also being personally not wanting to have any guns. I'm looking for your insight. I mean,
if you personally don't want guns, you shouldn't have guns.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like I understand like from a general community self-defense thing, like I think that's what it should be thought of as defense and deterrent, and not like obviously offensive.
I mean, I hear you about who it'll affect, but we're not trying to criminalize. I'm not for criminalizing just having guns. I want them to stop being manufactured. I want to go after the gun manufacturers in terms of regulation and strongly encourage the resale back to the government of weapons like the AR-15 through gun buyback programs. I think that's the best way to approach it.
What are we talking about when poor people needing firearms to protect themselves? If we're talking like a scenario where like you live in a really rural part of the country and there's no authorities anywhere near you, so you need to, God forbid, if someone breaks in or threatens you, you need to take that. I understand. That's, to me, that's like the edge case. I don't think that's what most people are talking about. I mean, I automatically think people are talking about that's like somewhat of the left-wing version of the rights, like there's going to be a civil war. I mean, like, what are we talking about when we say that we're going to need guns to protect ourselves?
Well, I mean, I think that we clearly have to deal with the culture of violence in our society before we talk about, like, what it would mean to disarm as well, because it's not simply enough to just like a call for disarming, because America, I think, has a genuinely and uniquely violent culture in the way we frame several aspects of our society, several like subpopulations to be inherent criminal elements that you have to be constantly vigilant and on the lookout for. In some cases, those elements are the police, and it's true. You should be constantly vigilant about the capacity for their violence. But on the same, on the other hand, I don't think that we can, that just can't be an excuse to not have laws, I suppose, that like they will be unevenly applied, because we know that like that's the part of like what we when we talk about prison abolition and police abolition as well, like there is a certain amount that gets taken for granted, that we understand that there's going to have to be a sort of a large scale change in how we think about things. But I can't really advocate for gun ownership broadly for the same reason I can't advocate for like people getting involved in crypto broadly, because a handful of people have been able to like lift themselves up out of poverty or like alleviate poverty for their community, because that's just not the, again, talking about patterns, that's just not the story of gun ownership and gun use in America. The story of gun use and gun ownership in America, at least when it comes to gun violence, is not protecting your family from an intruder. It's like blowing your own brains out. And, in a society that also does very little about mental health, even though when normally we talk about mental health when it comes to gun violence, we're talking about like mass shootings and all that stuff as an excuse to not do anything about it. But I mean, we just have a society in which people do not have access to mental health care, where suicide rates are on the rise. And, to advocate that everyone who belongs to a marginalized community should be aware and willing to arm themselves, I think is a double-edged sword in a way that, we have to consider when we talk about the holistic aspect of like gun ownership and what it means in our society. Because it's just, maybe in a different society, we could have gun ownership if everyone was taken care of and there wasn't such a vast divide in terms of resources. But that's not the society we live in. Just like the society we live in is not the society where like gun owners are like protecting themselves and their friends, whether it's on racial divide dynamics or like whether it's just like someone invading my house to rob me. It's like, it's just people's kids killing themselves in accidents. It's people killing themselves because they're depressed. It's, it's those things. And like to like pretend that those are the edge cases when in reality they're the standard, and the edge cases are like people protecting themselves. But I mean, I'm very sensitive to the idea that people do, want to feel safe and want to, feel like they have the recourse to defend themselves in a violent society that has, targeted them. But, that's just not what guns do, really.
Yeah.